Hello and welcome to my presentation on my dissertation entitled Awakening to Happiness, an Investigation into the Impact of an Expanded Sense of Self on Psychological Well-Being. Special thanks to my committee. What a wonderful team you've been in supporting and guiding me in this effort. Firstly, an introduction to the background of this study. It certainly appears that the impact of spirituality and happiness has been substantially under-investigated. It hasn't formed part of mainstream happiness research. Western philosophical approaches question whether we can achieve sustainable happiness. They appear to contend that the human condition is one of endless desire, and once a desire is fulfilled, another one comes along. Therefore, we'll never be truly sustainably happy. However, Eastern philosophies maintain that our happiness is our essential nature, and therefore that sustainable happiness is our birthright to be achieved by realizing this essential nature. Happiness research has tended to focus on the effects of happiness as based on hedonic and eudaimonic models of happiness, considering it's either about the pursuit of pleasure or the desire to live a good life. But there are substantial deficiencies in those theories. They don't tend to reflect the depth and breadth of human emotion that drives our day-to-day life. This study has looked at that research and looks at the impact of self-transcendence as a way of getting past the human condition, or in terms of going past the ego to realize our true nature. It contends that happiness is actually an underlying state of being that influences all thoughts and emotions, and it is the essential connection to that which makes us human, our spiritual nature. To be clearer on what problem we're trying to address in this dissertation, the first one is that prevailing models of happiness often fail to account for the deeper psycho-spiritual dimensions of our experience. Secondly, there is a lack of agreement in academia as to what happiness actually is. It seems to be interchangeable with subjective well-being or life satisfaction or pleasure. There's not a clear agreement on what it is. And finally, is that if happiness comes from inside, it's estimated that only 15% of our happiness is due to external factors, then what are those internal worldviews and experience that shape our happiness? Those problem statements have been refined to the two research questions. Firstly, in what way does the state of wakefulness, as measured by the Wake Inventory and the Self-Transcendence Measure Brief, correlates with the level of happiness measured by the Emotional State Assessment Tool and the Subjective Happiness Scale? And secondly, in what way do happy individuals, in what way do individuals with high levels of wakefulness perceive and understand their personal happiness? It may be helpful at this stage to take a look at some of the definitions in the theoretical framework. For this study, happiness is defined as a deeply subjective evaluation of one's state of being, encompassing transient emotions and enduring states of contentment and peace. Spirituality is defined as the aspects within ourselves that are concerned with meaning, identity, and purpose, and how we seek and experience significance and interdependence in relationships with others or transcendent figures. And finally, the link to psycho-spiritual development, which is defined as the process of growing the intrinsic human capacity for self-transcendence, in which the self is embedded in something greater than itself, including the sacred. The research design was a mixed method study combining both quantitative and qualitative investigations. Quantitative in terms of measuring happiness and wakefulness, and qualitative in terms of trying to gain additional information about why those results were achieved. There were 497 participants in the study, and they covered a broad demographic. In the chart on the right, you can see that we had responses from around the world, including 250 from the USA, 50 from Denmark, and 50 from Finland. They were recruited firstly through interest groups, particularly in non-dual understanding, but then the net had to be spread far wider to have a broader demographic. And so responses were brought from SurveyMonkey for Finland and Denmark, and for 100 people from the USA. So we have a very broad demographic that we investigated of all levels of happiness and wakefulness. This data was gathered via a SurveyMonkey survey. And then the qualitative data. There were two key components of this. Firstly, within the SurveyMonkey survey, there was a free text field for two particular questions. One was, what does happiness mean to you? And the second was, how did you come to your views on happiness? This was elaborated on 18 in-depth interviews with individuals who were considered to be high in wakefulness and happiness. Those two questions were asked and further investigations were undertaken. And now to the key findings. In the quantitative results, we found very strong correlations between measures of happiness and wakefulness traits. Positive score of 0.667 between ESAT positive and wake, and between subjective happiness scale and wake, a positive correlation of 0.589, and also a moderate negative correlation with ESAT negative with wakefulness. The results also call into question the tripartite theory that maintains that positive and negative emotion are independent contributors to happiness. We found a very strong positive correlation with subjective happiness scale with ESAT positive, and a very strong negative correlation with ESAT negative. Higher wakefulness scores were associated with lower emotional valence. That is, the more awakened you were, the more that you valued peace and tranquility. We also discovered that higher levels of happiness are associated with particular awakening characteristics. These are a sense of presence, a sense of unity, feelings of aliveness in the body and the world in general, an acceptance of life, emotional equanimity, pleasure in the simple things in life, and self-acceptance and the lack of need for external validation, all indicating two states that are essentially about our being. And now the qualitative results. Supporting these quantitative results, happiness was described in terms of underlying states of being, that of contentment, connection, and alignment, resulting in feelings of peace and joy. There was very little mention of money, achievement, self-improvement, positive thinking, health, and sex. It appears that happiness is achieved through self-understanding and not attainment. The interviewees further emphasized self-transcendence, a deep sense of connection to life, and an enduring sense of well-being independent of external events. They were certainly very clear about the causes of suffering, and they exhibited a very much reduced fear of death. From a personal point of view, they were seeking a more personal and direct relationship with the divine rather than relying on traditional religion. There are substantial implications from this study. First of all, happiness is deeply held and intrinsic and not fleeting. It underlies our thoughts, emotions, and how we deal with them. It's not the result of them. It's concerned with our state of being, our connection to our human essence. It is realized through deeper understanding and psychospiritual development rather than attainments and self-improvement. And finally, happiness is tied to self-concept and self-transcendence, to know who we truly are. Therefore, identity needs to be held lightly. In terms of future research directions, it appears that the state of being scale could definitely be refined. Some wakefulness characteristics are more important than others. Certainly, to investigate how this expansive self-identity can be measured and developed. Certainly some further research across demographics and societal considerations to see their contribution. And finally, of course, understanding the processes by which psychospiritual development can be encouraged. Thank you for your attention and support. And I'm reminded of something one of my teachers told me many years ago about the nature of happiness. He said, I used to think I was unhappy, and then I realized I just thought that I was unhappy. Thank you.